Welcome to Rethinking Death.life, the podcast where we flip the script on the spoiler alert. Everyone dies.
Hosted by the witty widowed death doula duo,
Kathy Dempsey
and Kim Harms.
We know our way around both life and afterlife prep. We tackle the big questions with humor and heart and a healthy dose of reality talk.
Whether you're planning your epic exit, pondering what's next, or just want to know if death really has a sense of humor, we've got you covered. Because rethinking death might just be the secret to truly living.
Welcome to another podcast on Rethinking Death.life. And we're excited today to have Edie Remus with us. She is the executive director of Compassus Hospice in the Nashville area. And we have known each other for decades. She has over 40 years of healthcare and hospice experience. And I am just in awe of her knowledge and information and willingness to reach out. I know when my husband, Ron, had renal cancer, stage 4, and it hit the brain, and we transferred him to hospice here in Scottsdale. And I called Edie because Ron wanted to know how he was going to die, because we had cut off the dialysis. So when you do that, you basically have like a week to live, give or take. But Edie, can you, first of all, thanks for being here. And
Welcome.
then, explain to us when Ron called and talked to you and said, tell me how I'm going to die. What did you say?
Well, what I said was, you're going to die very comfortably, and we're going to make sure of that. And you just have to talk about what is most important to the patient when they're dying. And we can make sure that we get to that and learn that. And we make sure that the patient is comfortable. If they want to be surrounded by family, then let's bring the family in. Let's prepare them for what it's going to look like. If there's animals, we have brought cats and dogs and all kinds of animals into patients' homes so they can be there with them. And they're very intuitive when it comes to end of life. You'd be very surprised. So it's just about how do they want to make sure that their last days are spent, and what can hospice do to help them with that?
Yeah. I know that when Ron was transferred to Hospice of the Valley, he was a musician. He loved to play guitar and teach guitar. And so we had the synthesizer in the room. We had the guitar in the room. We had all this musical. The whole room was decorated. And he was actually in a residential room, not actually at home, at his home. But he did something very unusual. And that is when he got transferred to hospice, I said, Ron, what do you need? What can I get you? And he says, I want to have an interactive funeral. And I said, what? And he says, I want to have an interactive funeral. I want to be alive at it. And so I'm like, okay. Within 24 hours, we had the whole community room of standing room only in the hospice all full. And we had people from all over the world on Zoom and conference calls and sending him messages for him to be read. And he had us laughing 1 minute and crying the next minute. And it was just so amazing. And when the nurses got him in the wheelchair and took him back to the room, and he was paralyzed on the left side, and believe it or not, he said, I can play the air guitar. I don't need my arms. And I said, Ron, how are you doing this? How are you dying so well? I mean, I'm the one that has the graduate degree in death and dying, and I've spent my life in helping people in healthcare. And I said, how are you doing this? And he said to me, Kathy, you die well by living well today.
Yep.
And I thought, wow.
That's perfect. what was their life like, and that's what we want to make them experience as they're shutting down and dying. So that they get to be as normal as possibly could be. If they liked music, play the music. If they wanted certain people, play the people. I remember my mom telling me there were certain people she didn't want there. Well, okay, I talked to make sure that happened. So, but it's just whatever they want, that's what the hospice should be doing for them, is setting that up.
And that provides some of the answer to my next question, which is, what does dying well mean to you based on your experience?
It means exactly how I have lived. I mean, I want my family there. I want my pets there. I want to be as comfortable as I can be. I don't want to be in a hospital. I want to be at home. And if I can't be at my home, I want to be at my children's home. I just want it to be as normal a process as possible. It's very different for everybody. My mom did not want to die at home. She wanted to go to the hospital to die. She was afraid for my dad to go back in the house if she died there. So we went to the hospital. It's entirely what people are comfortable with. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, so what are the most common fears or concerns that patients have as they're approaching the end of life?
That they may not be alert enough to tell their loved ones what they want to tell them. So, let's manage the medicines. Let's make sure if somebody is coming for a visit, let's make sure we're giving them the pain meds they need, but maybe we're monitoring that so that they can be a little more alert. And we talk to them about that. It's just a matter of what was their life like and how do they make sure they are shutting down the way they want to. There are some things we can manage around that. You can't control it, but you can manage it.
And along those lines, are there any rituals or practices you've seen that help patients or their families say goodbye in a meaningful way?
We always try to tell people if someone has their eyes closed and they think they're not listening, they're always hearing. So we always tell people, talk to them, talk to your loved one. It's important. Oftentimes you'll see music being played or people singing. A lot of times singing hymnals is very important, and it's just spiritual for people. There are some people that believe in prayer cloths or a prayer, a prayer doll or something like that they can have with them that is kind of meaningful. Obviously, Catholics do the last rites, they do the rosary, those kinds of things. It just all kind of depends on what the spiritual needs of that patient are.
Right.
My mother-in-law had her whole family gathered. She's the one that had 14 kids. Not all 14 were there, but most of them were there, gathered around her bed, and they sang. They were really good singers. So they were just singing her hymns as she died. It was a very beautiful thing.
Yes, very much so.
So Edie, what advice do you have for living a life that helps prepare someone for a peaceful, good death?
You got to prepare your family for what you want. It's important that you tell them. They may not want to hear it, but you tell them anyway. You write it down, you document it so that they're not making that decision for you. You're making that decision. They're just carrying out your wishes. So there's not the fighting over, well, you told mama this or I told mama that. No, it's not about that. Mama told us what she wanted, and here's what we're going to do. And we're going to honor mama's wishes. So that's the most important thing, is to tell people what it is that's important to you and how you want to do that.
Yeah. And what do you do when there's conflict between family members about what mom wanted or didn't want? And
so sometimes you have to take those conflicts outside the room where mama was, or you have to have your chaplain or a chaplain that's worked with that family to work together and kind of go out and kind of resolve that issue. You will not resolve all the issues. When people are dying, it brings out the crazies in people. It's just the oddest thing. But if you can try to really honor what the patient wants, that's why it's important to know that, then you can help to manage the dynamics of the patient's family outside the room where the patient is. because they don't have to be the one to go in front of that. You can buffer that.
Right, right. I remember a situation with a friend where the mother explicitly said she wanted to be cremated, and then the mother's mother said, no, you're not cremating my daughter. She's going to be in a casket, and so there was a big fight between the whole family about what the mother wanted compared to what the mother's mother wanted, and it got really ugly, involving the police and everything. It was very, very challenging.
Yep, it can be.
People are so afraid of death sometimes. So, how do you think the way we look at death and we die influences our approach to living?
So I think we are a society that we want to live at all cost. Everybody wants to live. Doesn't matter how sick you are, people want to live. And what you have to recognize is we're all going to die. It's just a matter of how we die and what that death looks like. But you can't prevent death. And sometimes when we try to do that, we cause so much more harm than good. And we're just not honest. You mentioned earlier, Kim, physicians don't want to tell people they're dying. Absolutely, they don't. I've had many a physician say, okay, can you go in and explain this to the family? Sure, happy to. That's what I do, and I do it well. So let me go in and explain that, so that they don't have to.
Right. I've seen that many times. And growing up in healthcare for my career, part of the goal of being a doctor is to save people, so it goes against, I think,
Mhm.
practitioners,
Yep.
really, it challenges their whole life of trying to save people instead of trying to let them die well and peacefully.
End of life care was never discussed in the physician's training until probably 18 years ago. So can you imagine? I mean, all these physicians that are in their 50s and 60s, they all were trained live at all cost. You do everything you can, and that's not necessarily what's best for the patient and the family.
Right, right. And I'm kind of curious, Edie, when did hospice start? Do you remember what?
In 1983 is when it actually started. Kubler-Ross really pretty much first started the first hospice. Um, and, it went all across the nation, little by little by little, and grew. And, now hospice is about 46% of patients that are qualified for hospice actually receive hospice.
Hmm,
So we're not even at the 50% mark.
interesting, interesting, interesting. Well, Edie, it's been great talking with you again. It's so informative and educational, and I know our listeners are just appreciate your sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
They can call me at area code 931-381-4090, or my email address is edie.remus, RIMAS, at Compassus, COMPASSUS.com.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Edie.
Thank
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
you so
Bye
much.
bye.